Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Import Export Hub channel, everybody. Bogdan here, your host for the next couple of minutes. Thanks for joining in. I hope that you are all doing great. And without further ado, let's dive into today's topic, in which I will cover the imports and the exports of oranges for 2022 with all the varieties or hybrids, however you want to call it. And guys, as usual, I've prepared some boring tables with the largest exporters and importers. Then I will pass through the top three from each flow in order to see the trading partners. And towards the end of the video, I will show you also the US export gateways and consequently their export values, along with hopefully some interesting FAOStat data about the area harvested, production and yield for the largest producers of citrus fruits. So without anything else to add here, let's see the largest exporters of oranges. And remember guys, this list is based upon the value of the exports, not quantity. And we see here that España leads the way with some $1.2 billion worth of exports in 2022. It was followed by South Africa with almost $763 million, while the bronze medal goes to Egypt with almost $636 million. So basically this is the podium for 2022, but as you can see here, we have other important ones like, I don't know, the United States, Australia or Turkey. The last one managing to export some $98.5 million. Interesting enough, the only country in this top 10 list that doesn't have one single citrus fruit grown is the trade-savvy Netherlands, who managed to capture a lot of business, not only in terms of oranges, but fresh fruits and vegetables in general, and who in 2022 managed to export some $240 million. And as you can see here, the overall compound annual growth rate for the last 5 years was negative, sadly, some 3% decrease, while Australia and also Turkey manage even lower result, and we see some 6% contraction for the former and 9.4% for the latter, which could be problematic for both of them if this is supply driven, so either yield or area harvested. Now, in terms of year-on-year dynamics, things are alarming as we see a 15% contraction. And again, I don't know if this is supply or demand driven. Most of the top 10 countries had a double-digit contraction in relative terms. And overall, the exports shrunk with more than $840 million. Portugal being the only country in this top 10 list who managed a positive change, some $310,000. And before I move to the largest importers, I want you to give you two tips in terms of fresh oranges sourcing. So Morocco and Zimbabwe, especially Zimbabwe, as it has a lot of potential if you ask me, and of course if you manage to circumnavigate the Dutch traders who are dominating the market in Zimbabwe. Now moving to the largest importers, we have here some $5.17 billion overall imports, with France leading the way. It was followed by Germany, and then we have the Netherlands with some $379 million. Other big importers are the United States, Canada, or South Korea. This last one with some $164 million worth of imports. 90% of these imports coming from the United States. The last 5 years compound annual growth rate again was negative, almost 3%, as in the case with the exports, with almost all the top 10 partners having negative figures in these last 5 years, except for the United States and Canada, who somehow managed to keep the momentum dating back in 2019. In terms of year-on-year changes, we have 13% overall contraction, some $765 million in absolute value. The largest contractions, again in absolute terms, happening in relation with Germany and the Russian Federation. For the former, I think that the contraction was mainly driven by the fact that they are coming back to pre-COVID levels in terms of quantities. Remember how in 2020 and 2021 we were told to take a lot of vitamin C? Well, citrus fruits are abundant, so that's one way of explaining the huge decrease in the figures coming from Germany, and not only, if you ask me. While for the latter, so the Russian Federation, I think that supply chain disruptions, uncertainties, and prudency about the future caused the $95 million contraction. But on the other hand, we see that the United States and Canada had positive figures, some $17.5 million more imports for each. And now that we've seen the largest exporters and importers, I will focus my attention on the top three ones from each flow in order to see the trading partners. And I will begin with the export flow, where Spain dominates, some $1.2 billion worth of exports for 2022. And we see that in this top 10 list, there are mainly European countries, except of course for Canada here. Germany and France alone account for 50% in Spain's overall exports, while the rest of 8 make up for the rest of 33-34%, as the top 10 partners make up for roughly 84% in Spain's exports. In terms of year-on-year changes, we see a 15% contraction, some $218 million in absolute terms, with big absolute negative changes coming from France and Germany. $76 million fewer imports for the former, and a whopping $105 million for the latter. But we see quite good figures coming from Italy and Canada, which are reinforced also by their compound annual growth rate from the last 5 years. Now, jumping to South Africa, which is the second largest exporter in terms of value, and we see almost $762 million worth of exports, with a lot more diverse base of trading partners, which is understandable as it has a big absolute advantage when it comes to the harvesting season, which is completely different from the Northern Hemisphere one. And we see that the Netherlands here is the largest partner. It was followed by China, and we have the United Arab Emirates on the third spot with almost $61 million. The overall year-on-year dynamic is negative, some 6% in relative terms, and almost $46 million in absolute ones, with only 3 countries here, so in this top 10 list, having registered positive changes. And we're talking about China, who had the largest increase, the Russian Federation also, and the last one is Malaysia, with almost $5 million more imports from South Africa in 2022 relative to 2021. Moving now to Egypt, guys, who is the third largest exporter with almost $636 million in 2022, which is 11% less than in the previous year. And we see again a lot of dispersed countries, as in the case with South Africa earlier, from, I don't know, the Russian Federation to India or Oman. This last one with some $18.7 million worth of imports from Egypt, but clearly we see that the Russian Federation dominates, and we see this in the share it has in Egypt's exports, which is almost a fifth. And guys, here it struck me to see that even though we have a $78.5 million contraction in absolute terms, the overall figure for the top 10 partners is positive, some $54.7 million more exports towards them. And I wondered what caused this big difference. And to my surprise, wait, I saw that in 2021, Egypt managed to export some $131 million of fresh oranges to areas not elsewhere specified, sorry, which could mean only two things really. One, either low value trade, which I highly doubted, so the second option, the partner was unknown to Egypt, which again I highly doubted, especially consider the value. And okay, I can perfectly understand that the customs authorities don't have all the info available for all the exports. Let's say, I don't know, a couple of $1 million in a year, but the $138 million is another thing. So something smells fishy here, even though we're talking about oranges. Anyways, I'm not here to make inquiries. I just found it strange and I wanted to share this with you. And guys, with this being said, also I'll move now to the import flow, where France leads the way with some $417 million worth of imports, mainly from Spain, South Africa, and Portugal. But of course, we have other important partners like Morocco, Tunisia, or Argentina, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. Now, relative to the compound annual growth rate, we have a 1.8% contraction overall, with good figures coming from Portugal and South Africa. Relative to the year-on-year change, we have some $39 million fewer imports, mostly because of the shrinking values coming from Spain. But on the other side, we see good figures coming from the two countries that I've mentioned earlier, who each managed to export with some $5 million more. Jumping now, guys, to Germany, world's second largest importer of fresh oranges, and we see that in 2022 it managed to import some $402 million worth of oranges, mostly from Spain, but we see others like, I don't know, South Africa, Zimbabwe, or Morocco, again to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, we have almost a 20% contraction, some $98 million. If I were to put a dollar figure to the percentage, the largest drop happening in relation with Spain, who saw its exports towards Germany shrink with almost $72 million, which is quite a lot if you ask me. So these were the numbers for Germany, and now I will move to the Netherlands, which is the third largest importer in the world, with some $379 million for 2022. Half of that coming from South Africa, while the rest comes from, I don't know, Egypt, Morocco, or Argentina. Again, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. Now, in what concerns the year-on-year changes, we see that the overall figure is negative, some $12 million fewer imports, with Egypt contributing a lot to this negative figure, even though the imports from South Africa increased with more or less the same amount. So all in all, the Dutch traders, guys, are doing what they know best: secure strongholds and capture exporting markets. One interesting example being in relation with what they've managed to do in Zimbabwe. And I think that the next mantra, if you want, is not to watch out for competitors, but to watch out for the Dutch traders. Now, joke aside, let's move very, very quickly through some numbers coming from India. I think this is a big export opportunity, especially for Egypt, but also for Turkey in the coming years. And we see that in 2021, India imported some $90 million. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers for 2022, But guys, I really do think that India is the place to be, even though it's a very price sensitive market. Now I will jump to the US exports again very quickly, as I've compiled here a couple of charts with the exports in 2022 and the first quarter of 2023, and it seems that they've exported slightly lower values in the first quarter of 2023 relative to the same period of 2022. Maybe the US exporters, I don't know, are going to catch up in May, which is the end of the season basically. And we have also a nice breakdown of the export districts in the United States in order to see the gateways, the export gateways. And guys, it comes as no surprise to see that California is the main one. And I don't know if you remember when farmers were complaining about the availability of empty containers in 2021 or 2022, and that's why the US agri exports rely a lot on West Coast ports, especially Los Angeles and Long Beach. Another thing that I found interesting is that we have some $9 million on a yearly basis of low valued exports towards Canada. And I don't know, this is just a supposition. Maybe somebody in Canada is exploiting some loopholes in the NAFTA 2.0 agreement in what concerns the minimis clause. Who knows? Personally, I find it strange. But anyways, I will now move to my last sheet, in which, as I've said, I've prepared a couple of data concerning the largest producers of oranges, data coming from FAOstat, and we have the yield, the area harvested, and long story short, guys, Brazil leads the way in terms of production and yield. China, the United States, Spain, Egypt, and Italy are yielding more or less the same amount, while India, Pakistan, and Iraq lack in terms of yield. So this could be a good thing for companies looking to export, I don't know, fertilizers towards them, but also machines for sorting, grading, or packaging. And guys, with this being said, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. I really hope I've managed to provide you some useful information. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like below this video. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.